Hello and welcome back to this session in the Gospel of the Stars. This is part 3 of 4, and this is Monica Hayden. I'm so excited that you're joining us again. So many of you, funny enough, everybody was using the same words when they replied. Were saying, I am hooked. I need the next session. I need to know the rest. So I believe by the end of this part 3, you will also feel the same way, and I'm so excited about this material. Just in my own creating these slides and reviewing it, it's just really exciting for me, and I'm just delighted to be able to share it with you too. So in this session, you'll recall in the last session I talked about how these the 12 constellations of the zodiac and their deacon stars are split into 3 groups of 4. So there's 12, we split them into 3 groups of 4. The first 4 in the last session, part 2, were about the nature of the Christ or the Messiah that was to come, and the stars that we looked at talked about that. In this session, we're going to be talking about the nature of the church or the bride of Christ. And I love this topic. It really, for me, it opened up worlds in understanding what God was intending for his church. And then in the next session, we'll be talking about them when they are finally together in heaven and beyond. So I'm really excited about these topics, and I think you will be too. So I'm going to go to Stellarium again. Let me get my little cursor working here and show you what we're going to be looking at today. So remember, in the last session we left off with Sagittarius. Now we're going to go into this Capricornus, the goat fish of all things, and then the water bearer, the Aquarius, and then we'll go into Pisces and into Aries, the lamb or the ram. Both are used. We're going to look at their deacons. This is Cetus, the sea monster. And then there's the Pegasus. This is Andromeda. This is Cassiopeia. This is Cepheus, the king. He looks like a shepherd here, but in the ancient world he was a king. And then the dolphin, and I believe that will be it for this session. But that'll give us, oh, and the swan, Cygnus the swan. So I'm really excited about what we're going to see here. And let's just dive right in. So the goatfish, right? When I saw this, when I was looking at the zodiac in general, at these sort of things, I thought, what in the world? How is anybody going to pull anything logical or even remotely related to Christianity out of these kind of creatures? But when you recognize that the names of the stars say more than the pictures, it really starts to make more sense. So just to recap, I don't think I had discussed this in the last 2 videos, but it's very important. Most of the names that we have that have been passed down to us today came from the Arabian pre-Islamic Arabs. And the pre-Islamic Arabs, if you follow them back, were from the line of Shem. They came through Ishmael, which was one of Abraham's children. And the line of Shem was one of the sons of the 3 sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Shem was the Semites. Out of them came all the Semitic tribes, which were the Jews, the Islamic tribes, and some other Arabian tribes that you still find in Arabia and the Middle East today. And so those tribes, if you follow back and you learn about them, were considered by the ancient world to be the followers of God. The Shem was the firstborn of Noah, and he tended to be the one that kind of carried the torch in the family for the worship of God. The sons of Cain tended to be the ones that were in rebellion against God. And then the sons of Japheth were the Gentiles, basically. They tended to become the European nations. So when you recognize that these names were preserved not by Christians, not by Jews, not even by Islamists, they had nothing to do with any religion other than what they were given through the stars. And From what I can gather, and again, I don't have a really great source beyond the book, The Gospel in the Stars, because I guess in the 1800s they weren't as picky about quoting your sources. But from what that man says, he says that the pre-Islamic Arabs that preserved these names in the stars gave credit to retranslating the names that they had gotten from Babylon or Babel when the Tower of Babel split. And then the Babylonians, according to this book, got their information about the names of the stars from pre-flood Enoch. Now, I'm not going to go into the book of Enoch because it's controversial, and I've read it and it is controversial. But what I find that's interesting about it is that it talks about Enoch being told by an angel about the names of the constellations. So take it or leave it. It's interesting. Anyway, let's dive into this now. So the names of these stars in Capricorn are, remember we just got off of the constellation, the last one that we looked at. Let me go back here. The last one we looked at was Sagittarius, remember? So it was kind of wrapping up, as the book of Revelation does. It gives us one picture of something and then it'll revisit the same situation from a different angle. So the story was kind of wrapped up, and now we're looking at this story from a different angle with Capricornus. We're looking at it from the side of people who are not just in heaven looking down, but who are on earth waiting for this hope to come to us. So in the head of the Capricorn are these stars. Now, if you study the Bible in Leviticus, there are multiple offerings that were a part of the system that God set up with the sanctuary. There were sin offerings, there were peace offerings, there were wave offerings, and always, 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 when it was talking about a sin offering, so an offering made to atone for sin, it would always be either a sheep or a kid goat, a little young billy goat. And and so what's interesting is that the name of one of these stars in the head, Al-Giedi, means a young billy goat, and in that culture people would have associated that with a sin offering in some way or another, because the next star in that head of the goat is the little goat that is to be slaughtered. I find that very interesting. And then one of the other stars is the slaughterer. And then, of all weird things, in the tail of the fish, even though that was a slaughtering, in the tail of the fish, and remember, this is not Jewish, this is not anything. It says it's the bearer of good news. And for those of you that are familiar with the word gospel, that word means the good news. So you have a killing of a goat, and it ends up in the tail that this is good news. Very strange. So the other thing that people would equate in the ancient world, if you've seen, there's a really cool series called Planet Earth that shows in Africa how this drought-ridden plain will fill with water, and all of a sudden all life is drawn to that location. Well, in the desert areas of the Middle East, this is likely what would happen too, when the rains would fall and then they would suddenly have flash floods or rivers start to flow. The fish would swim upstream and it would look like this. And so when they thought of fish, it was really equated in multiple ways with this life that would happen, that all the animals were drawn to, all the plants would start to bloom from. And so it goes from death, a symbol of death and sacrifice, to a symbol of new life, which is very interesting. And then one of the deacons that's above it, if you remember above that in the stars, is this Delphinus, which is a dolphin. And I thought, what a cool way to think of the new life in Christ in a way that I'd never thought of it before, as the joy of leaping up like a dolphin out of the ocean. And if you've been around dolphins at all, you know how happy and fun they are. And to think of the Christian life in this way was just a breath of fresh air for me. As not a plague, not a burden, not a trial, not a persecution, but joy in this new life that has been granted to us from the sacrifice of Christ. So, moving on from there, let's dive into the symbol or the constellation of Aquarius. So you can see it also is along the ecliptic, and it's this man pouring water, and the water is going into the mouth of this fish called Fomalhaut. And Fomalhaut, that star, is one of the most bright stars in the sky at night. So, in the stars of the name Aquarius, the water bearer, he's pouring things out, and the name of one of the stars, Said al-Malik, is the luck of the king. The luck of the king, or the good. I would say that luck is equated with good news, or something good, something lucky. So the good news of the king, or the gospel, is being poured out of this water jar after the sacrifice of Christ. And so in this symbol, it sort of shows how the gospel is flowing out from that to the world. This happiness that the joy that these dolphins are experiencing is flowing out to other fish that are drinking it up. And then the next star is the luckiest of the lucky. And when these stars are starting to come out toward the rainy season, when the spring is starting and all the new plants are starting to grow new leaves. And in the ancient world, the Egyptian, Persian, and Arab world, they thought of this time of year as the lucky time because things were starting to happen. And really in an agrarian society where everything depended on that rain, they really thought of this time of year as the foundation of their society. So it was a really happy time. Everything was that they needed to survive was being poured out for those rains. And so Siyat, one of the stars in this, is a wish. And then in answer to that wish, there's this another star called the outpouring of the water. And then down here at the bottom is the one that's just drinking it in, swallowing it up, Al-Bali, the swallower. And this fish is called the Pisces Astrinus, which means the southern fish. It's below the equator, or the ecliptic, excuse me, so it's in the southern hemisphere of the sky. And then the Fomalhaut, as I mentioned before, is the mouth of the fish, that drinking mouth. And so I think of this, after Jesus died, as the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, because that was promised. And certainly when you think of it from a little group, a very small little group of 12 apostles, which came out of a very small little group of 12 patriarchs, we now have this gospel going not just to the Jews, but to the whole world. And we'll explore that a little bit further in our next constellations after these deacons. So this deacon of Pegasus in the Aquarius sign is one of my favorite in the whole sky. Not because I think that horses are beautiful and winged horses are beautiful, but because of the nature of the message that's in these stars. So the word Pegasus itself, this winged horse, Pega in the ancient language means the chief or the king. And Sus means he's swiftly coming or returning. And then again, some of the bigger stars in this says Markab, the returning, Shiat, the going away and coming back, the going and returning. Said al-Matar, the lucky star of the rain. So again, that rain is coming and the Holy Spirit is being poured out. Said al-Bari, the lucky star of the splendid one, and Said al-Humam, the lucky star of the high-minded, or the man of high spirit. So in the way that, you know, when you understand the story of how Jesus came, he died, he gave the promise of the Holy Spirit, and he left, and he said when he left, I am coming back. This really, I mean, the story is just flowing as chronologically as it was given. So it's really cool. And then another deacon in the same constellation is Cygnus the Swan. You can see it here. The name of the biggest star is the Lord or Judge to come. And then another star is Azel, the one who goes and returns. So again, he's saying, I'm going away, but I'm coming back. Something has to happen while I'm gone, but I'm coming back. Fafaj means the glorious shining forth. Sadir is who returns, as in a circle, and this is, you're going to see this repeated in some of the other constellations. He goes away, he makes a circle, he comes back. Adij means flying swiftly. Aridid is he shall come down, and Afarasis is the riders. And when you think of a swan, I was looking at pictures of swans, and they do have riders on their back. And the Bible talks about how when Christ returns, he's going to bring us up with him, so that where we are, we can be with him. And here's this swan carrying her little babies on her back, not just in behind her, but with her. I thought that was pretty cool. All right, the next one is Pisces. So here's the two fish, and Pisces is incredible in that if you read about this in the ancient lore, it's one of the most ancient, it's in the most ancient texts of all in the zodiac, and it's always two fish, and these two fish are portrayed as female. And you'll remember, if you've studied the book of Revelation or anything, that a woman generally, whether she's a good or bad woman, represents the people of God. If she's a good woman, she's a pure virgin. If she's the bad church, she's generally portrayed as a harlot or somebody that cheats on her husband. But these fish are good fish. And one of them in the ancient stories is portrayed as the initiator, and the other as that person's progeny or their descendants. So the way that it's been interpreted in the Gospel and the Stars, which makes some sense to me, is that the Jewish people under Abraham, where God said to them, I'm going to bless you and I'm going to make you a blessing if you leave your country and you follow me. Out of you will flow a nation whose number can't be counted. They're like the stars. And so when you think of fish, this is kind of the idea that we're getting, is it's not just one or two fish, it's multitudes of fish. So in the Syriac, the word for Pisces is nuno, and it means the fish lengthened out, which in the interpreter's mind was not just a long fish, a long skinny fish, but representing that there would be posterity for generations upon generations and multitudes of people coming out of this fish. And then the pouring point, or the progeny, an alferg, from the old fish, that's this top fish, the progeny from the old fish, and then the progeny of the latter time, which was this fish. So it's talking about the fish before Christ came, and then the fish after he came, that are all here today. Then Alrisha is this little point where their band meets. So that's another important point. From the earliest times, these fish were depicted with a band on them, like a ribbon or a cord that's tying them together, so they're bonded together. And Alrisha, that word, came from the Babylonian risku, which I can't tell you whether or not that means a risk, but the Arabic said that meant the rope, the band, the bridle, or the cord. And then Al-Okta, which is right around this area also, meant the knot, or somehow these fish are tied together. They're united together. And then Al-Samaka, which is another, it's right here by the mouth of this southernish fish. That means the upheld. So by this rope that ties them together, they're being upheld. And I want you to keep that in mind as we go forward, because we're going to be referring back to these little fish when we talk about the constellations that are around them. All right, so when we're talking about the church and the former and latter churches, in the early rains of the Holy Spirit and the latter rains that would be poured out, of course, there's persecution in the church. And so the next, let me show you in the stars here. So here we have the Pisces, and then right above them, right here, is Andromeda, which is one of their deacons. So let's go back to Andromeda. So Andromeda is the chained woman. She's chained to a rock here. And if you've seen the Clash of the Titans, it kind of tells the story that was from ancient Greece. But she's chained and she's stretched out according to the names of the stars that are with her. And Adheel, one of the stars, means the afflicted. Merak is the weak. Mizar is the bound. And then she has somebody coming to save her. Incidentally, all the pictures I could find that were kind of from the ancient world or earlier renditions of this story, she's always depicted naked and totally vulnerable, just chained up. And there's this sea monster that's coming to eat her. And she can't get away. She can't run away. So Mosala, one of the stars in her areas here, means that she is delivered from the grave. It's also interpreted as Sheol, Hades, and Hell, delivered from hell. And then Misam al-Thuraya means the assembled or the abundance. So after she's delivered, she's assembled in a good way to something that's good. And again, this predicts the unfortunate persecution of the church. And we're going to look at the sea monster. He's another constellation that we'll be looking at in the next series, or in the next set. But before we do, we have to look at another deacon. This deacon is Cepheus. So let's look at him up here. He's right here. And so, and here's the sea monster that's kind of after her. And she's here. Let's go back. So Cepheus means, his name means the branch or the king. And you'll recall from the Virgo constellation that we talked about in the last video that Virgo was bearing a branch, which was a symbol of the seed that would grow into the Messiah that she would bear. So this is him in his finalized state as king on his throne. And again, this star on his shoulder is Al-Diramin. It means coming quickly, just like the swan, as in a circle. Right here in his belly, Al-Furk means the Redeemer. And by the way, in the ancient world, the belly area was the area that was the seat of emotion in their mind. So in his fondest emotions, he thinks of himself as our Redeemer. And then Regulus, I don't have a picture of where that is in this, it means treading underfoot. Al-Rai, that's in his knee, means the one who bruises or breaks. It also means the shepherd and the vociferator. I had to look that up because that's not a word I use every day. So to one group, to the group that likely responds to him, he's a shepherd, but to the other group, he's the vociferator. And to vociferate means to shout, complain, argue loudly or vehemently. And so, you know, the Bible talks about when he comes back for us, he descends with a loud voice, with a shout. And I thought that was very interesting. And then, interestingly enough, you'll remember from the last video, we talked about Draco being the center at the pole star, the dragon. But then he, since the time of the cross, since the time of the beginning of the planet, that pole star has shifted as the center of what the stars all revolve around. And lo and behold, it is now right under his foot, under this king's foot. So it went from the dragon to the symbol of the victorious coming Christ, which I find fabulous and very interesting. And what's interesting too is that this king he's a redeemer. He didn't take the throne like the Scorpio. He waited until the characters were revealed in that judgment we talked about in Libra, so that his crown is given to him. He is worthy of it, rather than he just took it by force. All right, now we're going to move next to the next constellation, or the final one, and its deacons in this series. And this one is Aries the Lamb. And again, there's nothing in our, there was no Jewish roots here. There was no Christian roots. Nobody was trying to force this. It was just there in the pre-Islamic Arab world. And I find that very interesting. So up in the head, you'll see these stars. Al-Hamal is the name of Aries, and it meant the sheep, the lamb, or the ram. And it also meant the gentle and the merciful. So it's, in many ways, it's talking about innocence. And then this innocence is about to suffer. So Mesartim, that's one of the names right here, means the bound, the minister or the servant. Al-Sharatan, that's this one right here, means the bruised. El-Nath, that's here right in his forehead, means the wounded. And El-Natik right above that means the slain or the killed. So this really is the emblem of suffering by a victim that was innocent and didn't deserve to be killed for any sin. Now above his head are 3 stars that make a triangle. They call those Ras al-Thalitha. And that the name of those stars together means the exalted, the chief, the uplifted head. You'll remember Jesus said, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men to me. So very interesting. Next, his deacons, the Aries deacons, we have the sea monster. So you remember the Pisces and their bands here. Interestingly enough, their knot is in Cetus, in this sea monster that's pulling them in the opposite direction, and they are swimming away from it. So here's Cetus, his head is over here, Pisces is over here as a V, and here's his head, Cetus's head, and Cetus's tail. So he's swimming one way, and they are swimming away from him. Now, if you watch the Clash of the Titans, this is the same monster that's going after Andromeda that we just looked at, the girl that's in chains that he's coming to eat. And he's in that movie, he's called the Kraken. In ancient Greek stories, he's also called the Typhon, which in their words is the father of all monsters. And in light of the great controversy and the war in heaven where Satan was cast out from heaven to earth, there's a similar story behind this monster that there was a person who was cast from Olympus, which is heaven, and he was thrown to earth, and from the underworld he creates this monster to destroy, to go back and try to destroy the people that kicked him out of heaven. And what's interesting is in the Chinese astrology, which is quite a bit different, they look at this area under this Cetus whale monster, and they call that the cesspit. So it's the underworld. It's the place where he's coming from, but it's disgusting and horrible. And then Minkar is his nostril, and the word in his nostril is bound, or he's bound or chained. He's a bound or chained enemy. Mira in the middle, where his heart is, so again this is another symbol of Satan, is the rebel, the one that's in rebellion. Difta, one of the other stars in this constellation, means he's overthrown or thrust down. And Kal Af Jadma is the cut short hand. So he's trying to do something, but his attempt is cut off. It's cut short. So very interesting. Now, there's one thing I want you to note as well. So he is pulling on these fish, likely in a persecutive way. He's coming after Andromeda to destroy her. And I want you to notice, it's not in all depictions, but it's in the old ones. It's not in the new ones, unfortunately, in Stellarium. But the foot of the lamb is stretched over these bands as if to say, you know, I'll let you go so far, but no further. That ultimately, over all of our challenges and over all of our pain, the lamb is in charge. And he is only allowing what he will allow, just like he did with Job. All right, next is Perseus. So again, if you've seen the Clash of the Titans, this relates back to Andromeda. And she's tied up there with the sea monster coming to get her. And he is the hero, another symbol of Christ, that goes and he has to do a bunch of stuff behind the scenes, but finally he comes when he's ready, and just in the nick of time, when she needs him very much the most. And he comes in on his flying horse, that's the Pegasus we looked at earlier, and he has the head of Medusa, which is the only way that he can kill this dragon, is by turning that head toward it and turning it into stone. This is not really how it died. Anyway, let's look at the meanings in this constellation here. So the name Perseus in the ancient language means the breaker, or the one who breaks the bonds. So remember, she's chained up, and then he comes and he breaks her bonds. And then Murphak, which is really nice, it's here in his heart, chest area. It means the one who assists, or the one that you can lean on, and you can see she's leaning on him here. And then Al-Ghanib is the one who carries away. That's another one. So he's carrying her, he rescues her, and he's carrying her away from danger. Now, he's also, that's him, but he's carrying this ugly head of the snake woman, Medusa, that killed everybody else in their attempt to kill her. They all died, but he's the only one that was able to get rid of her. And her name, Medusa, means the trodden underfoot. And then one of the stars in her is Rosh Satan, Rosh Satan. It means the head of the enemy. Al-Ona means the subdued or the weakened. Al-Ghul means the evil spirit. And then Al-Ghul, which is her eye, is the coming and going. So it came, it did its thing, and now it's done. And it also means the rolled head. So Satan had his chance. He tried to win, and he is done. And the coming and the going one that comes back again, comes back and rescues us from that. All right, then there's one last slide here, one last deacon. You've probably seen this W in the sky. It's one of the most prominent things I ever see with the naked eye in the sky. It's up toward the Big Dipper, and very obvious. And so this is Cassiopeia, and It's a woman on a throne. So after Andromeda is saved, she becomes the enthroned woman. She's been saved. Her name, Cassiopeia, means enthroned, the enthroned and the beautiful. In her hand, at calf, right here, is the branch. And you'll recall, if you remember the story of Jesus coming in on the donkey, people were waving branches because that meant victory, a symbol of triumph, and it also meant that you're the king. So she's got her royal branch. And remember, the king, Cepheus, we looked at earlier, his name means the branch, the king. Then Shadar, at her heart, which is right here, it means the freed or the delivered, the one that's been saved from the evil in the world. Rukba, here, where her bottom would sit, likely, means the seated or the enthroned. And then again, this is so cool, at her feet. Seg means victory, and win, the bottom of Sigyn, means friend. So remember, Cepheus, I'm going to go right back to him, his foot, and she's right here. So they're side by side. His foot is on the pole star. He's now the ruler of the world, of the universe. His foot is on the star that means the turning point. And her foot, because he rescued her, is on the, it means the victory that was won by my friend. Now, very romantically, both of these constellations side by side, because they're right next to the pole star, they never set in the sky, which I think is really cool because it's kind of indicative of the fact that they have a happily ever after that will never end. They have, because the whole sin issue and Satan issue has been resolved, now they will live and reign forever and ever and ever and happily ever after. So that was the third video. In the next video, we're going to talk about the final 4 stars and constellations and their deacons, which talk about the life that these two have together now that sin has been resolved. So I look forward to sharing that with you. We'll talk next time.